54% of you, 54% of you are not subscribed. But you know, in terms of new viewers that has never discovered DPA, is only around 700 people that had never saw DPA before in the last SITREP, which means a mass majority, 10,000 over of you guys are not subscribed, and this is actually blocking DPA from getting more new viewers. How can you do this to me? How dare you? Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 497 for the 5th of July. We are coming close to 500 days of Ukraine war. So let's start off with the Southern Front. At the Southern Front, as mentioned before, the most loved bridge in Ukraine is still getting love from Ukraine, and the Ukrainian forces continue to be landing forces in Dachi as the Russians trying to push the Ukrainian forces out. However, the Russian forces is struggling because the Ukrainians are shelling the Russian forces as they try to approach, and there are limited success for the Russians, but it's not still doing that well. The information is coming from Ryba, pro-Russian source, saying that the Russian Air Force has been trying to clear the bridgehead, and however, the Ukrainians continue to be sending forces into it. Just the night before, July the 5th, 2 groups were transferred on 2 boats from Antonovska, and they are continuing to be holding positions beneath the bridge and the hotel nearby. And the Russian forces is trying to recapture the territory, but the unit is under heavy artillery fire, and they retreated. So this information is also echoed by a neutral source, Surya Maps, where they mentioned about the Russian forces recovering some land south of Dachi, and however the Ukrainians withdrawal, the Ukrainian withdraw from the settlement. However, it's still considered a gray zone because they continue to do landing. So this is Surya Maps' description is a bit more of a macro situation, but the fighting is definitely still ongoing over at Dachi area. Moving on to the Zaporizhzhia Front. So Zaporizhzhia Front is here. At the Zaporizhzhia Front at the Kayamsky sector, the Ukrainian launched another attack against Zarebianki. So this information coming from the Russian Defense Ministry saying that the 128 Mountain Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces attacked Zarebianki, and this information is also reported by Surya Maps. Surya Maps say that the Ukrainian forces completely recovered a town of Pyatikaki, which is here, which I don't think is an accurate description, because Pyatikaki is not exactly something that you can hold, because basically the Russians have the front line over there. But Pyatikaki is totally abandoned by the Russian forces, where the Ukrainians basically just drive through. There is not much place you can hide over there, so which is why the Ukrainian forces can attack Zarebianki in a more direct sense, without needing to care about Pyatikaki anymore. So over at the Avdiivka sector, this is Avdiivka. At Avdiivka sector, there is a Ukrainian Sukhoi 25 shot down near Nesteryanka. So the Russian Defense Ministry, however, wrote Nesteryanki. I think it's just maybe a mistranslation. And then there is fighting reported at Luhivsky. So Luhivsky, this is Avdiivka. Luhivsky is over here. So there's some recon or probing over at Luhivsky region, and then this probing attack continues at Merne as well as at Mafopil in the Huaypole sector. So the Ukrainian forces are continuing to try to find a weakness in the lines where they can break through, and it is still need to be reminded that the main line of defense for the Russians is still here, and and around this area here. The one at Luhansk is actually the closest, with some major entrenchment in the area around the settlements. So there's one north of Bahate, the one in the south of Bahate, but the Ukrainian forces basically still trying to capture Luhansk, which is still not exactly where the main line of defense is. So this offensive is really very, very difficult for the Ukrainian forces. Over at the Velika Novosilka sector, this is Velika Novosilka, the Ukrainian forces now are concentrating their effort over at Staromayoske and Uruzhaine, south of Velika Novosilka. At Staromayoske and Uruzhaine, the Ukrainian forces attack from the north and also attack from the north of Staromayoske, north of Uruzhaine and north of Staromayoske. And then there's another force coming from the western part of Staromayoske, and there's also reported fighting near Makariivka. Probably is the same one as the one in the north. So all this information are coming from the Russian sources. Ryba reported there's a heavy fighting in the west of Staromayoske. Russian Defense Ministry's Vostok group of forces reported that they repelled an attack at Uruzhaine as well as at Makariivka. So these two information coming from the same source. And the Russian Defense Ministry in their main summary also mentioned about repelling attacks, 5 different attacks close to Staromayoske and Uruzhaine. So the Ukrainians are focusing their effort mainly here within the Velika Novosilka sector because previously we do have fighting at Rivnopil and Levatny Prirodny sector, as well as maybe at the Novodonetsk far maybe 1-2 weeks ago. So all this is now no more, only mainly over the past 24 hours the focus is down the river. So moving into the Donetsk Front, at the Donetsk Front we have fighting reported near Voleda. This is a recon force around the Voleda region that was eliminated or detected or contacted by the Russian forces. Nothing significant, it's not an offensive. There's no more fighting reported at Mikhailsky, or as well as near this Uglesborovnaya. And over at Marinka, the Russians continue their attack within Marinka. This is reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. And north of Marinka, there is fighting reported at Krasnohorivka, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. There is actually 2 different Krasnohorivka. There's one Krasnohorivka here, and there's another one over here. One Russian control, one Ukrainian control. And I determined it to be this one because of the sequencing of the towns. So Bilohorivka is at Luhansk, and Pervomaysky, Severny, Nevelsky, Krasnohorivka. So it's down this direction. So this is likely the Krasnohorivka that is being mentioned. But of course, it could be wrong. It could be the other one that they are mentioning. And then the person who write the report is just... Never mind. Moving into the Avdiivka Front. At the Avdiivka Front, in the north and northwest of Donetsk city, there is the Ukrainian attacks being reported. In the same piece of information talking about Krasnohorivka, the Ukrainians supposedly attacked at Nevelsky, Pervomaysky, and Opitny. The information in the north of Opitny, the information is also coming from SITREP maps. Let's delete this. And yeah, the one Opitny is only by SITREP maps. I think it's the updating because SITREP maps did not report over the past 2 days, so they are maybe is catching up with the information that is being reported. We have already done yesterday. And so the Ukrainian Avdiivka offensive is still ongoing. The Russians are also reportedly still attacking Avdiivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, with the attack probably coming from the east of the city. No significant information being reported. And there's nothing at the New York front. This is New York City. And moving into the Bakhmut Front. So the Bakhmut City is here. In the south of Bakhmut City, we have fighting reported at KLISHCHIIVKA. So SITREP maps as well as Ryba both mentioned that the Russians has been pushed back further within the KLISHCHIIVKA, and then there is a confusion of information on the Russian info space, where this so-called Alexander Slakov announced the abandonment of KLISHCHIIVKA by Russian troops. This is also, I saw this information by some other pro-Russian sources on Twitter. However, Rybar invalidated the information, saying that the information is not not reliable, because it is instantly refuted by the fighters that is currently still at KLISHCHIIVKA. So fighting is still ongoing, mainly on the western part of KLISHCHIIVKA. So the Russians are still holding the line around here, and the Ukrainians are pushing very heavily on the west and probably northwest part of KLISHCHIIVKA. The Russian lines has been pushed back. The Russians have been pushed back by the Ukrainian forces, and the situation seems to be quite critical for such a misinformation coming out, or confusion or information. Maybe the commander ran away. Maybe the commander ran away, but the Russian forces continue to hold the line. We do not know. I'm not sure why is there such a big confusion in terms of the information, because when I first saw the information being posted by Lord Bebo, I think it's called Lord Bebo, on Twitter, I find it a bit hard to believe, because generally the source he quote is not my primary source, so I have my doubts, and then this information is not corroborated. So tentatively KLISHCHIIVKA is still under Russian control, but the situation is getting more and more critical for the Russians as the Ukrainian push is getting stronger and stronger. So over at the northern flank, the Ukrainian forces also continue their attack. Information, sorry, this is wrong colors. This is actually supposed to be red. So the Ukrainian Defense Ministry said that the Russians are attacking. The Russians are supposedly attacking Donetsk and Bakhmut. My gut feeling is that it is the Ukrainians that is actually doing the attacking rather than the Russians. But the Russian sources did not mention about the northern flank, because the situation over the southern flank seems to be, sucking them in terms of their attention. So fighting is still ongoing. So you can, if you believe in the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, then the Russians are on the offensive over at the Bakhmut in the northern flank. So I doubt so. Honestly, I doubt so, because there is always a tide of war, and if the Ukrainians are making such a major push at KLISHCHIIVKA and it's actually very successful, I don't think the Russians will be spending time attacking over at Bakhmut region. It makes no sense. It's most likely that what you want is to hold a position and send reinforcement over at KLISHCHIIVKA. So this is probably what you want to do with the Ukrainians making a very major push at KLISHCHIIVKA region, because KLISHCHIIVKA cannot fall. If it falls, the entire southern flank of the Bakhmut Front for the Russians will be exposed. So to say that the Russians going on the offensive over at Donetsk region, it doesn't feel correct. It just doesn't feel correct. So moving on to the Siversk Front. At the Siversk Front, there is fighting reported at Rozhdolivka. Rybar, the pro-Russian source, reported that the Ukrainian forces increased their attempt to attack near Rozhdolivka, but we don't have much detail, so we're not sure what exactly is happening over there. Over at Bilohorivka, the Russian Defense Ministry reported that the Ukrainians are still on the offensive over at Bilohorivka. Yeah, I will say take it with a pinch of salt, because the fighting had been reported for so long. We didn't seem to have much information about that. Over at the Kreminna, this is Kreminna city. The Russians are reportedly still fighting over at within the Serebrenski forestry. However, we do have some probing reports near Serebrenka. Serebrenka is a kind of weird, because Serebrenka is actually here. So maybe it's within the forest region. I don't think it's in this area here. It just don't make sense. It's probably in the forest region. And we also have fighting reported near, what is this? Let me see. Dibrova. So this is fighting reported near Dibrova. So this is reported by the Russian Defense Ministry. So the Ukrainians are also still making actions within the forest. So the forest situation will always be very vague, because it is the forest. A lot of fog of war over there. Over at Torske is interesting. At Torske, we have the Russian Defense Ministry reported that the Ukrainians have some probing attacks or sabotage reconnaissance group being thwarted over at Torske. However, Rybar reported that the Russian offensive continues in the area of the Torske salient, saying that the Russians are actually doing the attack. So this also shows the possibility, because the pro-Russian source is invalidating the Russian Defense Ministry. So it's similar to Deep State UA and the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. So we can also have some kind of mindfulness that the Russian Defense Ministry might also be hiding their operations, not being honest about them being on the offensive. But we shall see how it goes. There's no clear change of front line over at the Kreminna Front. And over at the Makiivka region, the Russian Defense Ministry reported that they have repelled an attack near Makiivka. So the Ukrainian forces allegedly are attacking within this region, but then they got repelled by the Russian forces. And we move further up north into the Svatove Front, this Svatove town. There is fighting reported towards Novoyehorivka. This Novoyehorivka. And this is reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. They claim that the Russians were doing an offensive operation towards Novoyehorivka. Interesting, I would say, because we don't really see this being reported at all. The Russians haven't seen to be actually on the offensive over at the Svatove Front. So yeah, interesting information, but we shall see whether it will be a sustained operation. If not, then it's just a probing attack. Moving further up north, there is also fighting reported at Novoselivsk. So the main gist of all this information is that the Russian forces, so we move further in, there is a Kuzimivka train station over here. This area here is Novoselivsk. And this suburb area here is under Russian control. This is Kuzimivka. So the latest information suggests that over at this gray zone area, the Russian forces have actually launched an attack and captured the train station area and all this area, which is actually at the border of Novoselivsk. And allegedly the Russians are trying to push into the Novoselivsk to force the Ukrainian out. So this sounds very detailed, but it has been an ongoing thing for a very, very long time between Novoselivsk and Kuzimivka. Is like a bad divorce, where the divorce case go on for years, and then no one can agree to just agree to just split. I do not know. Moving further up into Kupyansk Front, we have nothing reported at Kupyansk, and then we have nothing over at the Kharkiv Front nor the border regions. So that's it. This okay, I also want to address, though there's a lot of talk about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, with the Ukrainians continue to say that the Russians have planted bombs. Oh, wrong color. Planted bombs, there is they're going to sabotage the nuclear power plant. I don't think so. The reason is very simple. There is no strategic advantage to bombing the nuclear power plant. There no kind of Russian blaming on Ukraine is gonna stick. It won't stick. The Russians have already said so many different things about biolabs and what or not. Nothing really sticks. So to bomb a nuclear power plant, which you probably will need to use post-war, with the Russians believing that they will win the war, they will need the nuclear power plant. So bombing it doesn't make sense. And even for the Ukrainians, it also don't make too much sense. Or at least to think of the Ukrainians trying to bomb the nuclear power plant and blame it on the Russians, while that is possible, it is still their own land. That's number one. Number two, it's a very, very high risk operation if the Ukrainians choose to do it, because if they bomb it, then they might be able to get NATO involvement, because it can be seen as a triggering of Article 5, because the whatever fallout from this explosion might actually affect NATO countries. But it's a long shot, too long shot, so long shot to the point where it is too high risk for the Ukrainians to do it. So my conclusion is nothing is going to happen to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. This is not the first time they talked about it, so I don't think anything will happen over there. So anyway, this is the summary for the day of 497 to the 5th of July. So please subscribe, because you guys, 10,000 of you don't subscribe. I'm not getting new viewers. The numbers is so small, right? 10,000, no, I'm only getting 500, 700 new viewers because they cannot, no one can discover the channel because you guys are not subscribing. So do help me, and I'll see you in the next update.